Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland. In this video, I'm going to express my admiration for David Pakman and suggest that you ought to view his show. So, Mr. Pakman is an American, what could I call him, a radio host or a YouTube star? Star might be too strong a word, but he's an advocate for various political causes. He doesn't report the news so much as he commentates on the political scene, principally in the United States, but he also looks at stories from further afield. So he's got a slightly unusual background, having moved from Argentina to the United States as a child, but obviously having acquired absolute mastery of the English language. There's not a vestige of a Hispanic accent in him, and he has an Eastern European Jewish ancestry. His father was a psychiatrist, which is perhaps why Mr. Pakman is so exercised when it comes to people being denied the healthcare they need, simply because they are stony broke, and the penurious can't get the healthcare they need, and that impacts other people. So I am my brother's keeper, especially if it's a mental health issue. So I know people who are very mentally ill might be sectioned, but those who are subclinically mentally ill can still have problems which will cause difficulties for others in the community, but may not get the treatment they need for free. So Mr. Pakman, he approaches his punditry from a liberal left perspective. Now, that's not to my taste, but he still comes across as affable, completely reasonable. Don't agree with him on everything, certainly. The thing is, the consensus in the United States is so much to the right that him being liberal left there would be kind of very much centrist in Europe. You know, in the British Isles, I'd be regarded as a right-winger, almost a foaming at the mouth one sometimes. But, you know, what passes for right-winger in the United States would be regarded as just plain daft, where I come from. Any politician who said the jury is still out on evolution would be laughed off the podium. Now, I know evolution is not really a left-right issue. Well, there are other things, or the tax breaks for the billionaires, so many people, working people, living in poverty. Obviously, the trouble is the definition of poverty. We keep shifting the goalposts on that one. But I like Mr. Pakman. He's very clever, yet he's not a show-off. He bears his erudition lightly. He keeps his emotion in check, even though he's talking about some highly emotive topics. And excessive emotionality is probably the greatest weakness of his opponents on Fox News and the like. So Mr. Pakman, he avoids that. His opponents, they emote, and they're not rational. They appeal to the irrational. Sometimes I think it's a strategy. Sometimes I think they know what they're doing. They're more logical in private, like, you know, Bill O'Reilly when it was still on the air. He must have realised deep down some of what he was saying was furphy. But whereas Mr. Pakman is placid and his arguments are lucid, even if I'm not convinced by them all the time, I don't think there's anything he's ever said which I think is bunkum. He's modest, he's self-effacing. This is not an ego trip for him, whereas too many broadcasters come across as narcissists. They are simply in love with themselves, they adore the sound of their own voice, and they're sounding off even when they've got very little to say. There's no sound and fury from him. It's all worth hearing. And he's not excessively wordy. And he acknowledges mistakes when he makes them. When he appeared on, I think it was Fox News, and he felt that his performance was substandard, he said, yeah, that was mediocre from me. So he's not attention-grabbing, and he spends a lot of his time trying to debunk some of the drivel which is pumped out by Fox News and those of its ilk. Now, not suggesting that every word on Fox News is bogus. So they do sometimes tell the truth. Sometimes they say things which are untrue, and indeed they deliberately misinterpret things. I suppose also a question of emphasis, of distorting things. And Mr. Pakman has to spend a lot of his time trying to tackle that. I think it was Mark Twain who said that lies get halfway around the world before the truth has got its pants on. And this is especially the difficulty in the age of the internet and rolling news, is that people can broadcast a falsehood, and then this fallacious statement is seen by tens of millions of people that get retweets and all the rest of it. And it's awfully time-consuming to try to debunk that. Disproving it is often very difficult indeed. And one has to go several steps back in the reasoning to disprove it. The whole blue states have greater inequality than red states claim, for instance, which sometimes that's technically true, but again, it's highly misleading to point out that, and it confuses effect for cause. So it's often dull to do so. And this is the trouble about Mr. Pakman's show, is because it's not emotive, because it's so reasoned and he's so restrained in what he says, that it's not exciting. His opponents, they're often attention-grabbing. If you think of Tomi Lahren or Stephen Crowder, who was a stand-up comedian and a voice actor, so he will use a lot of misdirection. He'll be shrieking, he'll be pulling faces, doing impersonations of people. So people might watch him for sheer entertainment and then pick up on some of his political opinions there. Or Ben Shapiro, who will pick up a liberal left talking point and riff on that one. And again, mislead people by making them think that social democracy and communism are the very same thing, things like that. And for those who are uninformed, this can be very beguiling. They could easily be hoodwinked by that one. So Mr. Pakman, he's well worth watching, and his videos are never too long. He has his assistant, I don't know the other chap's name. So Mr. Pakman, he seems to be delightfully free of any bigotry. He's hetero as it happens. He thinks there's obviously nothing wrong with being gay. What else about him? He's not a religious person at all, he said, but he's not motivated by this issue. He's not actuated to go out and be trying to tell people that they are suffering from a delusion if they believe in a deity or indeed a whole pantheon. So he's not like one of those atheist horsemen like Hitchens and so on. It's a distraction, I suppose, from what he considers to be vital issues, socioeconomic issues, what he would regard as being about social justice. So he's well worth viewing. I think you'll find his show edifying, so switch over.